program where extraterrestrial human hybrids were taught how to fit into modern human Earth society, underground at the northern edge of Area 51. Rachel, he told Helen Littrell and her daughter, was one of the alien hybrids whose original prime civilization is allegedly on a planet that orbits the yellow sun, Zeta Reticuli 1, about 39 light years from Earth, in a binary star system in which both suns are very similar to Earth's yellow sun.
Helen Littrell lived in Nevada and was the mother of Marissa Littrell, who was tragically born blind. When Marissa had enrolled in college in order to help with her expenses, she shared her apartment with a girl named Rachel. Marissa had become concerned after weeks of conversations with Rachel revealing the young girl appeared to have no past. Little things Rachel said and did aroused frightening suspicions in Marissa, which led to conclusions so incredible that she couldn't tell anyone, for fear of being thought to be crazy. The clips you're about to review are not only very rare, but may very well answer the question as to why the aliens with far superior technology haven't just taken over our planet.
So anyway, I didn't think much about it at the time, but I stood there and waited for her to come back. And as she returned, I guess she tripped on a wrinkle in the rug or her own feet or something. Anyway, I could see she was going to go right over straight. She didn't bend at the waist or anything. She didn't try to catch herself either. So I was standing close enough to reach out and grab her, and I did. I grabbed her left arm and kind of stood her back up again. And as I did, the sleeve of her jumpsuit slid up. And by the way, she always wore a long sleeve jumpsuit, plus a bandana tied around her head. And in those days, they tied it under the chin. They didn't tie it back in the back like they do now, but she had it tied under her chin, and she had huge wraparound sunglasses on. And she wore this whole outfit indoors and out all the time. So anyway, I reached out and I grabbed her arm, and as I did, her sleeve slid up like this. And I found myself grabbing onto skin that didn't feel quite real. I don't know if any of you out there, yes, I do too. Some of you are old enough to remember those dolls that we used to have. The skin was guaranteed to feel real. Well, it sort of did, but not really. And I remember my doll Beverly, she had skin like that. And anyhow, as I grabbed onto Rachel's arm and stood her back up, then with both hands, the skin didn't feel real. Not like other people's anyway. To begin with, it felt really cool, and it was a hot evening. It should have felt hot because it was in that part of California at that time of year. It's pretty warm. So anyway, I stood there holding onto her for a minute, and then I realized the skin felt different yet. It was sort of spongy, like mushrooms. And, you know, mushrooms have sort of a cool, they just have a spongy feel to them. And that was how the skin felt. Well, if that would have been the end of it, that would have been great. I wouldn't have thought much about it. But just then, as a result of the jerk to bring her back up to standing, her glasses slid down on her nose. And I found myself looking face to face, eyeball to eyeball almost, into her eyes. And I had never, ever seen eyes like that in my whole life. They were huge, kind of rounded in the middle next to the nose, and they went clear around onto the outside of her temples, and about a third of the way, between a third and a half of the way out. And they were avocado green, the inside of an avocado. And they had vertical black slits. And for a few seconds, I was pretty frightened because I'd never seen anything like that. And I just stood there. I was just drawn into her eyes almost. I'd never felt like that before either. It was bad enough not to see anything like it. I had never felt that way before. And as I kept looking into her eyes, I could see that she was much more frightened than I was. And at that moment, my emotions turned to more of compassion because of how frightened she was. And I don't know exactly what she was fearful of, except that she had been discovered, obviously, that I realized that she wasn't what she was supposed to be. And then I almost felt a sort of love for her. And the really weird thing was that as I stood there looking into her eyes, I felt that she was really beautiful. And yet I hadn't seen her hair yet, because she was still had the kerchief tied around her head. But something in her eyes made me feel compassion for her.
Helen said something just now in relating that story. It was the same thing, and we did not rehearse this part.
No.
She said something. She said she felt like she was drawn into Rachel's eyes. We'll come back to that later. This is Helen's drawing of Rachel. Now, Helen isn't really an artist, but I think you can get the idea of she didn't look quite normal. Is there anything else you want to say about Rachel? I mean, you did eventually see her hair. It was...
Yeah, and it was a beautiful reddish blonde. It was kind of skimpy and wispy, and it sort of had a mind of its own, too. She tried to comb it and, have it look attractive, and she kept it short.
In 1999, the Starchild skull was obtained by American researcher Lloyd Pye. Lloyd Pye was so fascinated by the skull that he devoted his life to researching every aspect of it. It was determined that the skull was around 900 or 1,000 years old. Dental testing suggested that the child to whom it belonged was no more than 5 years old. Scientists quickly denied the hybrid hypothesis and stated that the strange form of the skull was due to a genetic disorder such as hydrocephalus. This condition involves more fluid than usual in the skull, which causes it to enlarge. Lord Pye, however, firmly denied this theory, as there is a clear groove at the back of the skull, which is not in keeping with skulls affected by hydrocephalus. Considering the skull is meant to be that of a 5-year-old, the most confusing thing about it is that it's 10% bigger in volume than an adult skull. This, along with the other research that was documented, clearly suggests it did not come from a human. The skull is half as thick as human bones and twice as dense, making it extremely strong. One thing that really makes the Starchild skull stand out is the lack of sinus cavity and the additional attachments. The ears are lower, yet there's a considerable hearing region, making it seem like this skull is part human, but part another creature or race. Not unlike that of the Starchild skull. DNA tests suggested there was no nuclear DNA from the mother and father, even after 6 attempts to find one. Therefore, conclusions were drawn that this could be the child of an extraterrestrial father, but a human mother. Further research then considered the fact that the mother's DNA was also not human, making the skull of completely extraterrestrial origin. After all of the research conducted on the skull, in 2007, Lloyd Pye published an entire book on the topic titled The Starchild Skull, Genetic Enigma or Human-Alien Hybrid.
The alien hybrid process is one we've heard about in detail from researchers to abductees. We simply can't ignore scientific evidence representing our own modified anatomy. Lloyd Pye died in 2013, and I, like many of you, haven't heard about him or his research until going down the rabbit hole of online evidence acquired through history. The skull he uncovered is truly an amazing artifact, and we'll be examining him and his research in a future episode. I leave you now with a clip of Mr. Pye discussing the physiology of the skull.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Pye, and this is an exact stereolithographic copy of the famous Starchild skull. The Starchild skull is a real, true bone skull that was found in Mexico around the Copper Canyon area about 1930. Carbon-14 analysis has shown that it died about 900 years ago. As you can see, it is very different in shape from a typical human skull. But over the last 10 years with the Starchild project, we've had dozens of experts examine it, and they can come up with no kind of typical human deformity that matches all of the unusual things about this skull. Its unusual physiology begins with the bone itself. It's uniformly half as thick as normal human bone, and it weighs half as much. It's very light by comparison, and yet it's 2 or 3 times as hard. It's extremely durable. We think some of that durability comes from very unusual fibers woven through the matrix of the bone, never seen in any other animal of any kind. There's also a red residue found in the bone in the cancellous holes that is also very unlike any other bone that is known. So you have those unusual attributes right off the bat. Then in the rear, we see that it lacks an inion, which is that knot that we all have in the back rear of our heads. Everybody has that. Chimps have it, gorillas have it, everything has it. And that's where your neck muscles attach. Its neck muscles attach all the way down here, right on top of the foramen magnum, meaning it has a very small neck, like half the size of a normal human neck. And it sits at a different angle. The head sits at a different angle than a normal human head. Very different. Chewing muscles very much reduced. Normally up here, down here in the Starchild. Very small lower face. Look at these eye sockets. Look how shallow they are. Not even as deep as the first knuckle of my finger. Not even a full inch. In a human being, 2 full inches, all the way up to here. That depth. The eyes themselves are centered down here in the middle of the nose, so that the eyes are down here rather than up at the top like our eyes. Very, very unusual eyes. Unusual in so many ways. No sinuses in here. We've had all kinds of testing done over the past 10 years. Not just taking it to experts to get their opinions, but CAT scans, X-rays, scanning electron microscope, everything we could think of, trying to find out what it is, and it all comes back. This is not normal. This is really unusual. So, the main test we've had has been DNA, and what the DNA has told us is remarkable. In 2003, we recovered very easily its mitochondrial DNA, which told us that its mother was human. But in 6 full attempts, we could not recover its nuclear DNA. And nuclear DNA comes from your mother and your father, and so that told us right away that the father was very unusual, and the Starchild itself was very unusual. Now, during the course of this year, 2009, we're hoping to have a DNA test done that will recover the entire genome of this remarkable relic. And when we get that result in, and we believe that we'll have it by the end of this year, we know that this skull is going to make history as big and as dramatically as history can be made. It's going to prove that at one time on planet Earth 900 years ago in Mexico, an alien human being walked this earth.